Hello, welcome to the Feature Spotlight webinar for July of 2025. It is July, right? I do have my months correct, I hope. And welcome to the webinar. I do actually have something new for you today that for some of you, I think you're really going to like it. If you need to use it, it's going to be really cool to have. We have a new custom task. In fact, we have a whole bunch of stuff to talk about today. We have the new custom task that I just mentioned, but we've also got several other enhancements that have been added to the product for our next release, which currently is being called 6.1.400, but may become 6.1.500. Not entirely sure how the numbering scheme will work out in the end, but we will. It will be in our next version, whatever it is that we decide to call it. And there are a number of bug fixes, most of which you probably would never notice, I shouldn't think, but we'll cover them today. But to start off with, we want to talk about the new custom task. It is called JSON to CSV from a REST call. It is a web services custom task, so whenever we do release it, it will be contained in the web services subfolder of the custom tasks and be accessible there. What it does is it takes a JSON REST response and converts it to a CSV file that can be exported into the content list. That's what it does from beginning to end. There's actually a middle piece where we take the JSON, and in the current iteration, we're taking the JSON and converting it to XML. And then once it's in XML, you can use XPath to specify what part of the XML data you want to export and map that to a column, and then export it to a CSV file, which you specify the file name and what have you, and it stores it on the system. Now, what I'm about to show you is not ready for prime time. So it's new, but it hasn't been released yet. There's a couple of things that still need to be fixed up in it. There is one issue where it does not parse system variables in some of the text fields, so that needs to be addressed so that we can use system variables. Right now, I just have everything that needs to work in it hard-coded, but the released version will be able to parse system variables. There's also this other issue in the middle where it converts the JSON to XML. Now, I'm not sure why we're going through that extra step. We have a UI that shows it, and we'll see that here in a second. I've suggested that since we already have business values that we can use JSON path to grab the data, that maybe we want to look into, rather than having this XML conversion piece that serves as sort of, I guess, middleware for this custom task, that maybe we can just go straight to JSON path rather than converting it to XML and using XPath. Having said that, XPath is simpler for most people. It has a simpler syntax. It's easier to figure out what the XPath syntax should be. So there are arguments for keeping the middle piece of converting to XML. But let's take a look at it and see how it works. So here is a folder. I want you to notice there's only one thing in this folder, and this is the REST sample form. In a few seconds, that will not be true, but for now it is, and we are just going to run this REST sample form. Now, for those of you who go to the training webinar, you may recognize this form. I use this for the REST Web Services training webinar, and what happens is that when you put a zip code into this field right here, so as you can see, I've set a default for 92111, the San Diego zip code, and it will return the weather for that particular zip code. Now, this is great. This is a business value, and it's putting everything on the form the way it's supposed to be. So that part works. We know the business rules work fine. So now we want to take this same data that I am obtaining from openweathermap.org through their OpenWeather API to pull back the JSON data. And I can click this Export to CSV button. Now, I've just done the very basic configuration. So this Export to CSV button, while I have clicked it, there's nothing on the form that indicates anything impressive has happened. But if we go ahead and close the form instance here, and we reload this folder, there is a CSV file. It is called kerweather.csv, and we are just going to download and open it. And it's not a super impressive CSV file because I'm only returning a single record, so it only has one row of data. But here are the columns and the one row of data that has all of the current weather conditions for the 92111 zip code in San Diego. So let's take a look at how we got here by going into our form and going over to the Custom Task Event Mapping tab and opening up the configuration for the JSON to CSV from REST call custom task. So up here at the top, fairly standard stuff for any sort of REST custom task or indeed business value. I need the REST URL, which in this case is coming from openweathermap.org. Now, ideally, I would replace the zip code with the form field system variable for the 92111 zip code so that I could fill it out on the form, pass that form field value into that system variable as a parameter for the REST call. But as you can see, I am doing it, hard coding it for the 92111 zip code. It's not pulling it from the form in the final version of this. It will work. Obviously, we do our get, set, post, or get, post, put, patch, delete. All of those REST call methods still work. And what happens is, and this gets kind of filled out as you go. The first thing you need to do is put in your data for your REST URL and your method. And of course, if you have any credentials, you can use a compliance data source, or you can provide manual credentials there. This is a public API, so it's available anywhere in the world, so it doesn't really have any credentials to log into, so I'm not using it, but all of that is the same. Once you have done the REST URL and the method, and if necessary, the credentials, you can click the Test REST Call button. Now, initially, what will happen is that this area here that I have filled out, the result mapping will be empty. However, if it returns the proper JSON data, what you will see in this box is all of the JSON that got returned by the API. And then in the middle box, there will be an XML conversion. This will be blank because you will not have mapped any fields in the result mapping section yet. So you'll just see your XML here right next to the JSON. Now that you have this XML, you can begin to click the Add Mapping button and add the columns that you want to add to the CSV file. So as you see, I have 7 columns here that contain the current conditions, and using the XML that's down here in the XML text box, what you'll do is you'll use XPath to specify where your data is. Now, as part of the conversion, we add this extra P tag in here. I'm not sure why. I think it's just an artifact of the conversion method we use. So what we'll do is to find the wind speed, as we have here, we'll have to, let's keep both of these up. Let me go down to find the wind speed. There we go. So there's wind right there. Well, I've gone too far. You know what? Let's make this a little bigger. Let's make it way bigger since we have the ability to do that, because I want to be able to see everything all at one time. So there we go. So with this particular XML, to actually get my wind speed, I will go to start off the XPath with // and then my first node is P, another slash, and then my next node is down here, wind. So //p/wind/speed, and there is the node right there in XML. And so therefore I now have an XPath that will return the wind speed from the XML data. Like I said, it would probably be possible for us to do this through JSON. And maybe that is a good way of doing it, or a simpler way of doing it. But there is an undeniable ease to converting it to XML and using XPath to get the data. So your mileage may vary on how you would prefer this to work, but this is what we have right now. Now, once I have added my columns and I have set up my XPath expressions to pull all of the data for each column, I can click the test rest call button again. And when I do, that's when at the bottom, it will fill out my CSV box so I can actually see the comma separated text that gets produced from the conversion from XML using XPath to grab the CSV. The final thing that we would have to do, of course, is set up the destination. Currently, it saves directly to a folder in the content list. So there's a destination folder, which is an object picker that enables you to select the folder into which you want to place your finished CSV file. And the next property is the file name. You do not need to append .csv here. We'll do that for you automatically. All you'll need to do is provide the actual file name that you want to use. Again, in the final version of this, I would expect to be able to use a form field custom variable like my zip code field to add the zip code. So it would be cur_weather_92111 in this case .csv whenever it gets finally saved. So that is the custom task. That's how it works. There are some improvements that are coming to that custom task, and once the engineers are done with that, it will be made available. As you should know, custom tasks and Process Director are generally not released in sync, and new custom tasks can be added to the system without having to worry about what version you're on of Process Director. I have just taken this off of one server. I just exported the custom task by itself and just imported that single custom task into my web services folder, and everything just worked. So when that custom task becomes available, we will upload it to the support site so that you'll be able to download it directly from there. So that's the big new thing that will take up most of our time. Let's talk about some of the other enhancements. In the online form designer, currently, if we go into the design view here for this form or any other form, in the common control section of the toolbar, so that's these controls right here, the radio button has been our default for a long time. We're switching that up. We are going to swap out the radio button with the radio button list in this position. The radio button is an older control. It is more difficult to configure. The radio button list is a list control, so its configuration settings look exactly like that of the drop-down control or the list box control. All three of them are list controls. They simply have a slightly different look to them whenever they are displayed on a form, and obviously they operate a little bit differently because with a list box I can select multiple items, something you can't do with a drop-down or a radio button list. In fact, it would probably be best to think of the radio button list as just an alternative visual presentation of a drop-down, because the list box has some special sauce that's built into it. But the drop-down and the radio button list control are very, very, very similar in both operation and in configuration. They're almost exactly the same. The only difference is that the radio button list obviously gets presented as a list of mutually exclusive, clickable, round, I was about to say round circles, but sort of round buttons that you can click rather than having to click and select an item from a drop-down. So we're going to swap out those two controls. So this will become the radio button list. In fact, we've already made one change that you may have noticed by adding the journal control to our list of common controls. It wasn't always true. We added that control just a couple of versions ago. So there are now 8 of controls that show up here on the common or basic controls toolbar rather than the 7 that we originally had. By the way, you may notice that my menus are not in the same order as they appear on your installation. That's because I have a little UI customization. Indeed, I have a whole training webinar on that. Some other changes. Right now, if you want to create a new workflow definition, you can. We don't recommend it. Workflows are deprecated. We don't add new functionality to them. Workflows are ultimately going away. I sounded the warning for years about word forms, which many did not want to heed, but ultimately word forms went away. Ultimately, workflows are going to go away. We're not disabling, we're not getting rid of them. However, we are going to disable the ability to create them by default in the product. So they will not appear by default in the Create New drop-down menu in the content list. There will be a global variable setting to enable them. So you can just go to the global variables page, turn workflows on, and you can still create new workflows. And we're not removing any of the workflow functionality from the product explicitly, but we are going to change the product so that by default, workflows don't show up in the Create New dropdown. You'll have to go in and manually enable them to continue creating new workflows. I cannot express to you how strongly I recommend that you do not use workflows. However, I'm not your supervisor. You're going to do what you want to do, and that's fine. You should just keep in mind that workflow is a legacy technology, just as word-based forms were a legacy technology from 2016 to 2020. So just keep in mind that workflows are not going to be around forever, and create your applications accordingly. We have a new feature for custom fonts. I just talked about customization of the UI. Now I have a customized UI here. In fact, I use a custom font. I use Noto Sans, which is the closest to our official corporate font of Proxima Nova. And I use it for everything. And in fact, I have made it by customizing my UI. I have made it the default font for all my forms. Now, this is a little bit of a pain to do, requires some knowledge of CSS and HTML to work out, but I have to have a custom font. It has to be uploaded to the server. I have to create a custom style sheet to pull the font. There's some hoops to jump through. If you look at the developer's guide, the developer's guide has a section called UI customization that goes into detail about how you can customize the UI the way that I have in my installation. But we are going to make one thing a lot simpler, and that is the ability to use custom fonts. So what you'll be able to do is if you want to use a custom font and have it appear, not in that box, but in this box, see, I have Noto Sans and I have barcode that I've added. I don't know why I added barcode. I really should just take it out. I think I did it just for illustrative purposes. But I've added these two fonts through a custom configuration, and having done so, they now appear in my dropdown whenever I'm creating forms. So I always have access to Noto Sans, and I've even gone further and made Noto Sans the default font for both the online form designer and for the text editor when you use that in input controls and you use the text editor for a rich text input control. We're going to make that a lot simpler, and there'll be fewer hoops to jump through. What you will do with your custom fonts is you will upload them to a subfolder of your custom folder, or if you're a cloud customer, we'll upload it to a subfolder of your custom folder that is called, oddly enough, fonts. And once you place a custom font in the fonts folder, Process Director will automatically process that font as a custom font. It will appear in the dropdown in the online form designer so that you can use it there. And you will have that custom font available to you without having to jump through all of the extra hoops of changing the config file for the online form designer and then creating a custom CSS file with a font face directive to ensure that that font is usable by everybody who looks at that form. It'll just work simply by you uploading a custom font file, usually a true type file or an open type font file. Just upload it to the fonts folder, which will be a subfolder of custom, and that will just work for you. There is an additional upcoming enhancement to add a new property to the global variables page to enable you to specify that font as the default font for all forms, so that whenever you just create any new form definition and you go in the online form designer, your desired custom font will just be the default font. So it does make customizing the UI and thus branding and identity for your organization on forms much easier. There is a new has access to user search property for web services user searches, which I know that only a very, very small number of customers ever even use, but what it allows you to do is to specify on a user-by-user basis whether that user can actually use the web services user search feature that is part of the web services. It's kind of an edge thing, but it was something a customer requested to be able to do because they are, in fact, using web services in that way. So that's an enhancement that we've added for the web services. Various cross-site scripting security improvements have been added, but of course, as is my custom, I will not be going into any detail about those security improvements. Finally, bug fixes. There's quite a few of them. One, which I found particularly irritating because it was so unnecessary, was an error message that would pop up anytime you chose an icon in the icon chooser. And I mean, anytime you chose an icon, it would tell you, oh no, this is all going to fail. Destruction and disaster are upon us. After which everything worked exactly the way it was supposed to work. So we have gotten rid of this entirely unnecessary and not useful error message so that hopefully we only see error messages when there's actually an error to prompt the message in the icon chooser. Now, this was a weird little HTML glitch. And I'm not sure it affected everybody, but it did affect a couple of people. I know there was a customer who reported it, and also one of our people internally was running into it. If you were navigating through a section that had a table in it, sometimes you'd click your mouse cursor somewhere, and for whatever reason, the cursor would then just jump to the top of the page. And sometimes on some forms, it would happen often enough to be extremely irritating. There was apparently some sort of span slash table slash section conflict where the browser lost control or lost knowledge of where your mouse was because there was an improper either ID or class setting on one of the HTML elements of the page. And so if it ran across that, it would just move your cursor back. It would just say, I don't know where this cursor is supposed to be. I'll just shove it right up to the top of the page and you can start all over. It doesn't do that anymore. Business values that use the knowledge view data source were not returning all of the results. That was a weird little error, and also one that's kind of hard to tell that it's happening because, when you run the business value, you don't see the knowledge view, and it returns you this record set, and you think, oh, okay, well, it's working. Well, not exactly. It wasn't working. It was partially working, and it was returning what looked like to be a very nice record set. It was just missing some records. So we addressed that. The workspace navigation items. If you look at a workspace inside Process Director, you have these navigation items right here. Now, for the most part, everything was great, but occasionally you would run into one of these navigation buttons that you would click and nothing would happen. Or it would try to go somewhere and whatever was showing up in the main pane of your screen would it would just disappear. So you just have this blank white screen there, and then you would stare at it for hours and nothing would happen. So there was something a little wonky going on with that navigation for some items. It seems to me that knowledge views were a particular problem where you'd click and it would start to run the knowledge view and then would just hang up. So it was a weird little navigation thing. We've fixed that. Some new updates to the documentation. Now the documentation is updated with a fair amount of frequency. If you go to the main page of doc.bplogix.com, there's actually a link on the front page to the changelog page, and you can see everything that's on there. However, there were two items on the developer's guide that weren't there that were specifically noticed and requested by customers. So they are now in the documentation. In the form control class, there is a property called display.style. That is one of the valid properties of the form control class. It was not listed in the documentation. And a customer was asking, what is the syntax to make that thing work? Now provided that syntax and an example in the form control class page of the developer's guide. Also, the SDK control for the icon. So as you know, in Process Director, you can build your own custom forms using Visual Studio, and you can build them as ASCX custom controls. Now, when you do that, all of the Process Director controls have an ASP.NET control that can be placed on the form with a particular syntax. We were missing the form control for the icon. And if you're just using the online form designer, there is one of the other controls, I think, is the icon control that enables you to specify an icon number and then display that icon. That was missing from the SDK that has now been added. Another issue, the navigate to parent icon was working in a little wonky fashion. Normally what should happen is you should be able to go here, and if you want to go to the parent, you click the navigate to parent icon and it navigates to parent. It took a while, but it finally navigated to my parent when I clicked it. Well, that didn't always happen. And so sometimes you had to click the navigate to parent icon twice. We fixed that as well. Disappearing sections. That was a problem. Again, another display problem where if you were clicking around in a section, sometimes the form designer would just lose track of what it was that you were doing, and it would just remove the section from the form completely. Never a good thing when that happens. Again, CSS, HTML issue that we fixed. I don't think anyone here uses Japanese characters, but Japanese characters, when using an export to CSV, especially from Analogy, they weren't showing up right. It was just an encoding issue. I have the KVBB's not returning everything. We already talked about that. We fixed the icon chooser erroneous error message. I already talked about that. Overly precise date times. You were doing date time comparisons. Sometimes you were saving date time with milliseconds. And pretty much nothing happens in the system at the same millisecond. And so some date time comparisons were failing because we weren't just, comparing them, hour, minute, but it was going hour, minute, second, millisecond. Too precise. Pretty much everything fails when you go down to the millisecond level of granularity. So we have made that. So we've gone back to minutes as far as date time comparisons. Breadcrumb navigation. If you look in the Analogy, you have these breadcrumbs up here at the top, which technically you're supposed to just be able to click on and navigate through your content list to the appropriate location. Yeah, great. They weren't working. Now they are. Tab fields. So if you had a tab and you put an enabling or disabling condition on a tab, it would work. But what wouldn't always work were the fields that were contained on that tab. They were not being enabled or disabled along with the tab. So technically you could disable a tab and still have enabled fields on that tab. That's not how things are supposed to work. Tabs are container controls. You disable the tab, you should be able to, it should disable all of its constituent controls automatically. That wasn't happening. Now it is. And we're done. That's it for today. As always, thanks for joining me. Let me check Q&A to see if there are any questions. It does not appear that there are. So have a great week or a great month for those of you who don't go to the training webinar. For those of you who do, I'll see you on Thursday. For those who don't, I'll see you in August. Talk to you then. So long.